Hello and welcome. In this tutorial I will show you how to create an input from scratch with only HTML and CSS. In this tutorial I will show you how to create a default input with an icon. I will show you how to create the material UI input, and at the end I'm going to show you how to create the material UI input with a border around it. So let's get started. So to get started I'm going to create a index.html file, and I'm also going to create a CSS folder with a styles.css in it. I'm then going to add the boilerplate to our index.html, and I'm going to add a head tag in which I will put the Roboto font that we are going to use and the Google API icons which we also are going to use. And then I'm going to link our own style sheet. Like so. And after I've done this, I'm going to open up the body and I'm going to type test, and I've opened up the browser, and when I refresh the page I will see the newly created text, and if I write test2 I will see test2 behind it, so that's really good. So before I'm going to write some code, I'm going to create a couple of variables that we will be using. I'm going to create them in our root element, and I'm going to say that we have a primary color which will be this color. I'm going to say that we have a light gray color which will be this color, and then I'm going to define a dark gray color like so, and it will be this color like so. And I'm going to save this up, and then I will create a form inside of the body, and in our form we will create every input. So I'm going to say that this form has an ID of tutorial form, and inside the form I'm going to create the container for our first input, which will be the default input like so. And I'm going to create a input with a placeholder for now, and the placeholder will be input like so. So I've saved this up, and if I refresh the page we will see the input appearing. So I'm going to set up a few things first. I'm going to make the input centered on the page. So I'm going to target the body. I'm going to say display flex, justify content center, and align items center. So justify content center centers it horizontally, and align items center centers it vertically. So if I refresh it, we'll see that it is horizontally centered, but the body has no height, so it cannot center it vertically. So to give the body height, I'm going to say that we want a height of 100 view height, and now it is centered vertically, but we will have a scroll bar at the right, and we don't want that, and the reason that it is because we have a margin on the bottom. So I remove the margin and we won't see the scroll bar anymore, so that's really good. So next I want to define the font family that we are going to use, and the font family will be Roboto like so. And our placeholder is not changing font family, but we will fix that in a second. So for the first input, I want to create an input with an icon next to it. I'm first going to add the icon to it. So I want to say I class equals material icons, and then I want to say that we want an account box like so. And if I refresh the page, we'll see our icon appearing, but it is next to our input, and I actually want it inside the input. So I'm going to target the icon. I'm going to target it by the ID, and I'm going to say that we have a position of absolute like so, and then we want it to appear in the left side of the input, so I'm going to say left of 0 pixels like so. But as you can see, it is now on the left of the page, and the reason that is because it is relative to the body and not to the input itself. So to fix this, I'm going to add a new class to our input. I'm going to say input wrapper, and to this class I'm going to add some styles, and those styles will be position of relative, and I'm also going to add a margin already, 10 pixels, 0 pixels, so the margin will be clear later, but right now I'm going to add the position relative. I'm going to comment this out for now, and as we can see, it is now relative to the input. The next thing I want to do is create a little bit bigger, so I'm going to say default input, and I want a padding of something like 10 pixels. So if I put this above here and save it up, we can see that our input now has some spacing in it. but our icon is not appearing at the center of our input, which I do want. So to fix that, I'm going to say that I want a display of flags and an align items of center. But this won't work yet because we still have to give a height to it. So I'm going to say height 100%, like so. And for this to actually work, I'm going to have to put the icon in front of the input, so like this. And when I refresh the page, we will see our icon appearing inside the input and vertically centered. So next I want some spacing between the icon and the border. So I'm going to say margin left of 8 pixels, like so. And then I want some spacing between the icon and the placeholder. So I'm going to say that the input has a padding left of 35 pixels, like so. And now we will see some spacing between those two. I'm going to copy over these styles to here. And then I want to apply our font family to the placeholder. So to do that, I'm going to target the placeholder. And I can do that by writing two columns and then a placeholder. So this will select the placeholder element inside our input. And I'm going to say font family inherit, like so. So the reason why nothing is happening is because we haven't applied our font family to the input yet. So I'm also going to have to add it here. I'm going to say font family of inherit. And if we refresh the page, we'll see that the input has a font family of Roboto, and everything we type in here also has a font family of Roboto. So to finish up this input, I'm going to fix the icon, because if we click on the icon, we cannot type in input, and I actually want to be able to type in input when we click on the icon. So to do that, I'm going to add one more line to our icon, and this line will be pointer events, and I'm going to say none, so that every pointer event will be ignored by this icon. So if I refresh the page and I click on the icon, I can see that the pointer event is being ignored by the icon and being picked up by the input behind it. So that's really good. We have now created our first input. Next, I'm going to create the second input, and this will be the material UI input. I'm going to copy over this and change this with material input. I am then going to remove this, and I am actually going to remove the placeholder as well. And instead of the placeholder, I'm going to add a label which will say input. And if I save this up and refresh the page, we'll see our second input appearing. And this is why I added a margin to the input wrapper. And if I comment this out, we'll see little margin being applied. So right now we only have 10 pixels margin between each other, but I actually want that they have 20 pixels because this one has 10 and this one has 10, so together is 20. So to get that to work, I'm going to target our tutorial form, like so, and I'm going to say display flex, like so, and I want to say flex direction column, like so, and now we have 20 pixels of margin between the two inputs. So that's really good. We have that working. So before I'm going to start on the material input, I'm going to create a little bit of comments right here. I'm going to say that this will be the default input, and then right here we are going to create the material input, like so, and I'm going to leave this as it is. So to get started on the material input, I am first going to work on a label. So I'm going to target the label inside of the material input, hashtag material input and then label, and I want to say that this has a position of absolute, like this. And then I want to position the label inside of the input. So I'm going to say left of 0 pixels, like so, and then at top of 0 pixels, like so. What I want to do next is I want to make the input a little bit bigger. I'm going to target the input for that one. I'm going to say material input, and I want to give it a padding top of 27 pixels and a padding bottom of 7 pixels, like so. And if I refresh the page, I will see that our input is growing a lot bigger. So I think I can even remove the top of 0 pixels, because that will be by default. And if I save it up, it will still render in the top corner. And I think if I leave the left out, no, then it won't be good. So I'm going to leave the left inside of here. What I want to do next is I want to make this input just as wide as that input. So I'm going to go into our inputs, and every input that we have is inside of our input wrapper. So I'm going to target it by the input wrapper, like this, and then I select every input, and I want to say that we have a width of 100%, like so. But as you can see, this input is bigger than 100%, and that is because we added a padding left to it, and we actually want to add the padding to the width. So to do that, I'm going to use the box sizing of border box, like so. And now the padding is calculated width to width. So now every input is equally as wide, and I can start working on the placeholder for our second input. So for the input, I want the input to be at the same height of the line right here. And then when we click on the input, I want this placeholder to move upwards and become smaller. So to achieve this, I'm going to use a transform. So I'm going to say that we are going to transform this one, and I'm going to translate it by 0 pixels and then 27 pixels, like so. And as you can see, it is now translated by 27 pixels from the top, the same as we added the padding. So next I want to say that if we are focusing inside of our input, that we want to translate it back up. So to do that, I'm going to say hashtag material input focus within, and then I want to target the label, and then I want to say that we want to transform it to translate to 0 pixels, like so. And if I click on the input, you can see that it moves upward, and if you click outside of it, it moves downward. So that's really good. It looks really cool. What I want to do now is I want to make the input smaller. So I'm going to add a comma, and I'm going to say scale, and then 0.75. So if we click on it, it isn't working, and the reason that is because we added a comma, and we don't need a comma for multiple transforms. So if I remove this and refresh the page, we'll see that our input is decreasing in size and is moving to the top. But as you can see, it moves a little bit to the right, and that is because our origin is in the center of the label, and we want the origin to the top left. So to fix this, I'm going to add a transform origin, and I'm going to say top left. And now if we refresh the page, yes, we see our input appearing in the top left corner. So that's really good. What I want to do now is when we have the input at the top left corner, we want to make it blue. So I'm going to say color of primary color, like so. And then when I refresh, we will see our primary color being applied. So I think this already looks really good. But what I want to do now is I want to create a smooth transition between the two states. So to do that, I'm going to add a transition. I'm going to put it underneath the transform. I'm going to say transition, and I want to transition the transform. And I'm going to say 200 ms, and then easy in out, like so. And if I refresh the page, you will see that it is now transitioning nicely between the two transforms. So that's really awesome. And I also want to make a transition between the two colors. So I'm going to add a comma and say color 200 ms is in and out, like so. And now when we click on it, we also have a transition between the two colors. So I want the label to actually be a little bit grayish when we aren't focusing on the input. So to fix that, I'm going to add a color by default, and I'm going to say that we are using our variable, which will be light gray, like so. And if I refresh the page, we will see our color being applied. So this already looks really neat, and we can type in it as well. But one thing is not working yet, and that is if we type something, the input will go back down, and that is not what we want. And I'm going to fix this by using the placeholder, which we have added here. So even though the placeholder is empty, we are still going to use it. And how we are going to use it, I will explain right now. In the CSS, I can ask if the placeholder is being shown, or if it is not being shown. And then I can apply some CSS rules. So I can say if our placeholder is being shown, I want the label to appear inside of our input. So that's good because right now our placeholder is being shown. We haven't typed anything, so the input will be here. But right now we have typed something, and the placeholder, which is actually nothing, is not showing anymore because we have replaced it with our own value. And then I want to say that the input has to be in the top. So that is what I'm going to write in CSS right here. I'm going to select the input element. I'm going to say not, and then I'm going to say placeholder shown, and I'm going to target the label like so. And if I refresh the page and type something in like so, we will see our input staying in the top. So that's really good. It is working. The only thing I haven't explained is the plus label. So this means the sibling selector. So it will check for the next label after the input, directly after the input. So that will be this label. So that is how we selected that one. So one more thing to add here is the font family. As you can see, we are still using the normal font. So I'm going to add a font family to our input, and I'm going to say inherit like so. And as you can see right now, we will have the material UI font. So that is working correctly. What I want to do now is I want to actually remove the border from our input. So I'm going to say border of none, like so. And then I want to add a custom border to it. And that is what I'm going to do now. So I'm going to select the input, and then I'm going to add a before and after element. And I'm actually not going to select the input, but I'm going to select the surrounding div, because a before and a after selector need a element which can have a child, and the input is a self-closing element, so this cannot have any children. So I'm going to select the material input for this one, and I'm going to say that we want a before, and I want to leave the content empty. So right now we are not seeing anything, but if you look inside the browser, we will see our before appearing. And what I want to do now is I want to style the before. So I want to say that we have a border bottom of 1 pixel solid, and then our variable, which will be the light gray color, like so. And it is actually not appearing. So to fix that, I'm going to give it a position of absolute, a left of 0 pixels, and a right of 0 pixels, like so. So now we have the border, but it is at the top. So to fix this, I'm going to say bottom of 0 pixels. And now we have the border at the bottom. So good, we already have this. What I want to do now is I want to add some special effects to it. The things I'm going to do is I'm going to add a hover effect. When we hover over this, I want the border to become a little bit more thick, and I want it to be black. And when we click on it, I want the border to be blue. So to do this, I'm going to add a hover effect. I'm going to say hashtag material input hover, and then before. And then I want to say that we have a border bottom of 2 pixels solid, and then I'm going to use the dark color, so dark gray color, like so. And right now, if we hover over the input, we'll see our dark color appearing. And then I'm going to add the blue border to the bottom, and the blue border is actually another element. So how it looks behind the scenes is that there is a second border being applied over our first border. So I'm going to use the after element for that one. I'm going to say hashtag material input after, and I'm going to say that we are going to copy this because it will be in the same position. And then I want to change the color. So instead of light gray, I'm going to say primary color, like so. And I actually want to make it 2 pixels, like this. Well, I saved this up, and if I refresh the page, we will see our blue border being applied. But we only want this when the focus is within our input. So I'm going to say focus within, like so. And then you can see that the blue border is being applied when we focus inside of our input. So this already looks pretty good, but I want to add some transitions to it. So first I want a transition between the hovering state and the non-hovering state. So to add that, I'm going to say transition border bottom color. I'm going to say 200 ms easy and out, like so. And if I refresh it, we can see a nice little transition. And then I want to transition the blue border bottom, and I want this transition to start from the center to the left and center to the right. So how I am going to do this is I'm going to give the blue border initially a width of 0%, and when we focus inside of it, I want to give it a width of 100%. So how this will look is the following. I'm going to say that we have a after, and inside my after I will say this. and as you can see, it is now being applied. And to remove it, I'm going to say the transform scale x of 0. So now it has a scale x of 0, so it won't show actually. And then I want to say, if we focus inside of it, I want to transform scale x of 1, like so. And then when we click on it, we will see our border appearing. And to finish it up, I'm going to add a nice little animation to it. So I want to say transition, and I want to transition the transform 200 ms easy and out, like so. And if I now click on the input, we will see a nice little blue border expanding and shrinking when we click outside of it. So that is really good. We made the material input, and I think it looks really cool. I want to add one more thing, and it is that we can click on the actual input. So I'm going to apply the same trick that we did to our icon, which was pointer events of none. So I'm going to say that we want on our label a pointer event of none. And if I now click on the input, we will see that we can just type in it. So cool. Okay, now I'm going to create the last input. For the last input, I'm going to create a similar input, but this time I'm going to create a full border. So I'm going to copy over this, and I'm going to say material input border, and I'm actually going to keep the rest. So if I refresh, we will see our input appearing, and I'm going to create a new section. So I'm going to copy over this, and I'm going to add a space, and I'm going to say material border input, like so. Okay, awesome. And then I want to so I'm first going to rename this class to material border input, and then I'm going to remove the border of our input. And the reason to why I'm doing this, I will show you in a second. So right now our border isn't visible anymore. I have to target the input like this. So right now our border isn't visible anymore. So just for the example, I will show you what will happen if we keep our border visible. So what I want to achieve is that when I click inside of my input, I want the border to be 2 pixels instead of 1. So initially I actually want a border of 1 pixel solid black, and then a border radius of 5 pixels, something like this. And when I click inside of it, I want it to be 2 pixels. So let's say focus within input border 2 pixels solid black, like so. Okay, so now if I click inside of it, it will get a 2 pixel border. Oh, but what is happening? The whole layout is changing. That is not what we want, because this is not looking nice, and I don't think it is good performance either. So instead of using the border of the input, I'm going to use a before and after element, and I'm actually only going to use a before element right here, and I'm going to use position of absolute, so it won't recalculate the layout anymore. So I'm going to remove those two again, and I'm going to keep my border none, like so. And I am going to add a before, so I want to say hashtag material border input before, and then I want to give it a position of absolute, a top 0 pixels, left 0 pixels, bottom 0 pixels, and right 0 pixels. And then I want to say border 1 pixel solid, and then var light gray. So if I refresh this, nothing is happening, because we still have to add the content, and the content will be an empty, so like so. And now we have our nice little border appearing, so that's looking good. If I reset the border right here, we will see that the border is a little bit bigger than the actual border. That is because the input is also taken inside the border. So for now, I'm going to leave this border, and I'm going to focus on the input. I'm going to say that I want to add a little bit of padding to our input. So I want to say padding 10 pixels, 0 pixels, something like this. And I actually want a padding left as well. So I'm going to say padding left of 5 pixels, like so. So when we type, actually I cannot select it. That is because we are selecting the before element. So I'm going to say pointer events none. So if I now select the input, we'll see that we are typing a little bit more from the left, and that is what we want. So I'm going to create the label for our input, and the label is going to be a little bit different from last time. So I'm going to say material border input, and then I want to target the label, and then I'm going to say that we have a position of absolute, a left of 0 pixels, like so, and then I want to give it a transition, or no, a transform of translate, and then 10 pixels from the left, or I meant yes, so I'm going to give it a padding of 10 pixels from the left, and 10 pixels from the top. So if I refresh this, it will appear at the same height as our input itself. So that's really good. I'm actually going to create 20 pixels padding at the top and bottom, and I'm going to transition this or translate this 20 pixels as well. Okay, so now that we have that done, I'm going to apply the animation for our input. So I want to say when we click inside our input, I want this label to go a little bit higher. So I want to say hashtag material border input focus within. I want to target the label, and then I want to say transform of translate 10 pixels and then 0 pixels, and then I want to also scale it down so we won't have that big of a label. So this looks really good. I only want to make it, instead of 0 pixels, minus 10 pixels, I think, something like that, because we want our input being inside of the border. And I also want to make it blue, so I'm going to say color, and I want to use the primary color, like so. And I actually want to remove those two brackets, sorry. And now when we click on it, we will see our color being applied. And we still have to change the transform origin, because it is transforming from the center. That is not what we want. We want to transform it from the top left corner. Transform top left, like so. And it is not working because I forgot to add origin. So this is working correctly. So I don't actually want to say top left, because we already have a transform of minus 10 pixels. So we can keep top, but then we should do minus 5 pixels, like so. But for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to remove the top right here, and I'm going to say that we want to translate to minus 10 pixels, because that is half of our padding, like so. And as you can see, our input is now being rendered correctly again. So what I want to do next is I want to transition our input, and I want to change the color of our black input to a gray input. Or well, when I say input, I mean a placeholder actually, sorry. So I'm going to say color var light gray, like so. And I have to add that to our label right here, and I'm going to add it to the bottom actually, like this. So now our input is gray, now it's blue and higher, and I'm going to add a nice transition. So I want to transition the color 200 ms, and then easy in out, and I want to transition the transform 200 ms, easy in out. So now we have a little nice transition. So that is working correctly already. I now want to focus on the border. So what I want to do with the border is I want to make a gray border. When I hover over it, make it black, and when I click inside of it, make it blue, and make it 2 pixels. So we already have our light gray border. I only want to add a border radius of 5 pixels, like so, maybe 10 pixels. Yes, now I'm going to keep it at 5. And then I'm going to say if we hover over our input, and then I want to target the before, I want the border of 1 pixel solid, but then dark gray, like so, like this. And then when we click on it, I want it to be blue and 2 pixels. So I'm going to say, instead of hover, focus within, like so. And then I'm going to say primary color and 2 pixels. So now our border is increasing in size, and what I showed you earlier about the whole layout being changing its position, this won't happen because our before element is being positioned absolute, so it won't have to recalculate the rest of the elements. So that is really cool. There are two more things I want to add. I want to, or actually three. I want to add a transition between the colors in the border. I want to make the label stay at the top when we type, and to finish it off, I want to make the input clickable when we click on the input. So I'm first going to start with making the borders transition nicely. So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to add a transition to our input before. I'm going to say transition border color 200 ms, and then is in out like so, and it will look like this. And what I want to do then is I want to make the input stay at the top. So I'm going to use the same logic as that we used with our material input. So I'm just going to copy over this and put it inside of our focus within, I think. Yes, inside of this focus within. And instead of using the material input, I'm going to be using the material border input, like so. If I save this up and refresh the page, it will stay at the top. So that's really good. And then to finish it off, I want to make the input clickable. And I actually saw one more thing, and that is that the input is going behind our border, which is not what we want. But first I'm going to make the border clickable. So I'm going to say label pointer events of none, like so. And now our label is clickable, so that is working correctly. And to fix the label appearing behind of our element, I'm going to give it a z-index of 1, like so. And if I refresh the page, we'll see that the label is appearing in front of our border, but right now the border is displaying through our label because the label has no background. So I'm going to add the background to it, which will be white. And I'm actually going to say background color, like so. And right now we will see that the label has a little white background. And I made a little mistake there. We don't even have to add the z-index of 1, because now that we have a white background, we will always see the label appearing in front of the border. But right now the label is being closed in by the border really close, so I want to give it a little bit of breathing space, and I'm going to give it a little bit of padding to do so. So I'm going to say padding from the top and bottom 0 pixels, and from the left and right 5 pixels, like so. And as you can see, we have a nice little padding at our input right now. And I think I want to move it a little bit more to the left now that we have added this padding. So I'm going to say 8 pixels of padding, like so. And then I want to move it 4 pixels to the left. So instead of transitioning it 10 pixels, I'm going to transition it 6 pixels. So that's the half of our padding. 6 pixels, like so. And now the input is at the same location as our text. So now we have created a default input, a material UI input, and a material UI with border input. And I am really happy with the results. I think it came out great, and I hope you have enjoyed it and that you could follow along. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!